Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Sallallahu wa sallam wa baraka nabina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajmain. So as always, thank you for coming out, taking time out of your Monday evening to join us for the Monday meeting, whether in person or online. And there are a few housekeeping things that we'd like to start with before we begin tonight's program. The first one is that I would like to humbly request that each and every one of us make it a point to intently, and I underscore the word intently, offer prayer for our Imam and for his family. They are going through a very difficult time, and it is incumbent upon us to be very considerate and to be very caring and to show our consideration, our caring for their situation by praying for them in the way that we would want others to pray for us if that were our situation. So please take these words to heart. And as I said, intently offer prayer for the Imam and for his family, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give them strength and help them get through this difficult time. Ameen ya Rabbil Alameen. The second housekeeping thing is that it was brought to my attention because we had mentioned last week that we would really like to have more people attend the program in the masjid. And the attendance, when we first started, was very, very good. And since then, wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, since then, it's kind of been up and down. There are some good days, there are some not so good days in terms of in-person attendance. And it was brought to my attention that one of the reasons why the attendance may be poor, maybe some people come late, is because people are fasting on Mondays, and they either opt to watch at home as they make iftar or have their dinner, or they opt to break their fast at home and then come to the masjid, consequently arriving late. So what we have decided to do with the Imam's consent is to provide a light iftar, a light meal or snacks for fast breaking. And I said light, I'm stressing the word light. Why? Because it is not a dinner. We're coming for the class, we're not coming to eat. But people who are fasting would appreciate not having to wait an extra hour and a half before they're actually able to consume something. So the Imam consented that we could have a light iftar consisting of water, dates, and a finger food like small pizza slices, sambusa, things like this. And so what we're looking for now is people who will commit to sponsoring either a night or sponsoring an item. So I'm putting that out there now that we would like to every Monday provide dates, water, and like I said, a finger food, or at the very least dates and water. And if there are people who are interested in participating, please let me know at your earliest convenience. You guys have my email. You can see me on the way out. You can speak to my family. At the end of the day, if you're interested in providing something for iftar, please let us know. Also, I think in the coming days, today will just be like giving you a heads up, but in the coming days, we'll actually bring a calendar. For once a person wants to sponsor a specific day, we'll bring a calendar. You can sign up for that day, tell us what you're going to bring, etc. We'd like to do something like that, have something formal, and that we're all in the loop on, inshallah ta'ala. And I just want to mention in conjunction with that, that fasting on Monday is a sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, and it is a highly recommended deed, something that we should all try to do, especially as the days begin to get shorter. So it's easier to fast, and we should take advantage of that and get the reward from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There's a hadith collected by Muslim in which the Prophet ﷺ was asked about fasting on Yom al-Ithnain. He was asked about fasting on Monday. And so he basically said, this is a good thing. And then he justified it by saying, ذَاكَ يَوْمٌ وُلِدْتُ فِيهِ وَيَوْمٌ بُعِثْتُ وَيَوْمٌ أُنزِلَ عَلَيَّ فِيهِ. He said, yes, it's good. I encourage you to fast on Monday because that is the day that I was born, the day that I was appointed as a messenger, and the day that I received revelation. It is also well known that the Prophet ﷺ, it was his custom to fast on Mondays and Thursdays. And he was asked about that, fasting on these 2 days. And he said, في هذين اليومين تُعْرَضُ الْأَعْمَالِ. He said, on these 2 days, the deeds that we do are presented to Allah. وَنُحِبُّ أَنْ يُعْرَضُ عَمَلِي وَأَنَا صَائِمٌ. I like that my deeds will be presented to Allah while I'm fasting. Just like one of us, he goes for an interview wearing what? His best suit, right? He just feels like my credentials, in addition with how I'm presenting myself, is more likely to get me the job, right? It's kind of the same concept. My deeds are being presented to Allah on a day when I'm fasting, more likely for my deeds to be accepted by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So I encourage all of us to try to fast on Mondays, especially, like I said, the days are getting shorter. It's easy. It's easy. You won't even feel it, but you'll get the reward from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and your deeds will be presented to Allah on a day when you're fasting. The last thing I want to mention, this is specific to the sisters. Well, actually, before I transition from the fasting, again, it's a light iftar. And if you're going to sponsor, remember that, bear that in mind. We don't want the iftar to become the focus. We don't want it to become the centerpiece. It's a light iftar. Also, if you're going to sponsor, come early. Because if you come after the adhan, the people who are expecting iftar will be going hungry. So if you're going to bring early and bring something light. Third thing, housekeeping before we begin, and this again is pertinent to the sisters specifically, is that not long after Salat al-Asr, there were 3 young Muslim sisters who came, and they were all new Muslims, and they were looking for someone who would teach them how to pray. And they will come back, inshallah ta'ala. I gave them a book that would help them with wudu and salat. But obviously we all know, especially those of us who converted to Islam, that there's a very steep learning curve for wudu and salat and some of the details of that. And so it's very good to have someone to teach you. And so they will come back on Sunday at 1 p.m. And if there is any sister or group of sisters willing to come and spend about an hour with them teaching prayer, maybe even less, I have their contact information. I would love to pass that on to you, and I would love for you to commit to being here to teach them how to pray, inshallah ta'ala. طيب. Last week, before I actually get to this week's lecture, I just wanted to follow up on last week. There was something that I wish I had said that I didn't say, or a loop I wish I had closed that I didn't close. So last week we were giving examples and practical ways of how the devil, Satan, exploits our divisions and our failure to cooperate and collaborate. The main thing we talked about last week was the importance of collaborating and cooperating, and how the devil, when we don't do that, exploits our failure to do so for the common good. And one of the ways that we said he preys upon us and tries to harm us and minimize our effectiveness is by enticing us to divide into smaller, less diverse, less inclusive communities. So basically, and this happens all the time, you have, for example, in a particular city, a multi-ethnic, multicultural, multinationality community. And so when you have something like that, you have all these people who just bring so many different perspectives, so many different ideas, so many different skill sets to the table. And so the potential is enormous. But what ultimately happens is they allow oftentimes illegitimate differences to or illegitimate justifications to divide them. And then that multicultural, multi-ethnic, multinational community becomes much smaller, almost exclusively Arab, or almost exclusively Desi, or almost exclusively Somali, Afghani, whatever communities. And we talked about how this harms the community, or the harms that come to the community as a consequence. So we talked about, for example, the resources, whether they be human or financial, they become minimized. So you have fewer resources. And we gave the example, if you had a community 3,000 strong, what they would be able to do would be significantly less if they were 300, if they divide into 10 communities of 300. So you can see the financial resources will be less, and the human resources will be significantly less. Also, we mentioned that in this process we talked about we gave the analogy of the rope, how it's made out of many what? Strands, but when you all put them together, they're so strong that you can attach them to the bumper of a semi and tow it, even though it has a trailer attached to it, etc., and it won't break. But we said that when we start to divide and become these smaller, less inclusive, less diverse communities, then we become strands instead of what? A rope, and we can't pull anything. Means what? We become less effective, and we do less things, and we do those things that we do less effectively. So this is what we talked about last week. There's one thing I didn't say last week that I wish I had said, and I want to say it now, and that is another thing that the shaitan causes us to do, and it's the way that he exploits our divisions, is that we will actually, in these smaller, less diverse communities, we will do without beneficial programs and services. Or we will partake or produce programs and services of an inferior quality, because we have personal issues with individuals associated with the program. So these less diverse, less inclusive communities, they have a rival community, and that rival community is doing some type of program, and that program is highly beneficial for their members. But because they've bought into the concept of being divided and the whole concept of, us against them, then they won't partake, they won't participate because they're doing it. But this program is beneficial. It could benefit our members. Yeah, but they're doing it. They'll actually do this. And so there's something that will benefit them or benefit their members, benefit a segment of their community, a certain demographic. They'll do without it. Do without the benefit because the other people are doing it, right? And I want to be specific to Colombia for a minute, digress. I know we have people from other communities who are on with us. So for example, I just want to say briefly that in this masjid, Masjid Muslimin, you can say whatever you want to say about the masjid and whatever. There is a collection of people who are very competent, capable, intelligent, highly skilled, highly credentialed. And those people have come together to actively work to produce high quality, highly responsive youth programs. They're the ones who brought you the promotional event for the camp. They're the ones who brought you the summer camp itself. They're the ones who are bringing you more and more activities, with more and more activities to come in the fall for youth. And their work speaks for itself. And they have something which other community organizations can't boast. They have a collection of people who have all of these talents, but in addition to these talents, many of them, most of them are converts, which means they've lived a portion of their life outside of Islam, which means that they can relate to the experience of our youth better than what? Better than those who don't have this experience. They know what our youth need. Why? Because they've lived those needs. And so they're more able to relate also to the youth and interact with the youth in a way that many immigrants, they just can't. And so all of these are reasons why other communities, which are predominantly immigrant, let's say, should be interested in working and collaborating with this group of very competent and qualified individuals, but we don't see that. We don't see it. We should see it, but we don't see it. And if you were to ask these people from these other communities, do we need youth programs? Do these programs need to be responsive to the needs of the youth? Not just what we think they need, but responsive to their actual needs. Do these programs need to be objective based and not just, let's just do something? No, we should have an objective in mind. And these programs should actually be something which can achieve those objectives. They would all say check, 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 agree, agree, agree. But we don't see the collaboration in spite of the fact that we agree, and their limited ability to achieve what we just talked about, to produce these types of programs, because they don't have the skill sets and they don't have the ability to relate like these people do. But instead of collaborating, we see us against them, we see Crips and Bloods, we see that. And brothers and sisters, this is yet another example of how Satan is exploiting our division and making us the cause of our own undoing. I want to say this, I want to put it out there. I know other people watch online, some people from these other communities. I want them to hear these words from me. I want them to hear these words from me. If we care about the youth, and we should care about the youth because they're the future of Islam, then we should be working together on these youth projects. And these people, and I'm not talking about me, I'm talking about the team of people who are doing these amazing things. I am not indirectly trying to talk about myself or toot my own horn. No, I'm talking about the people who did the camp, the people who did the promotional event. These are some amazing people. We should let these people lead. And these other communities should follow their lead, even though they're associated with Masjid al-Muslimin. Tayyib, enough on that. Let's come to tonight's selected verse. As we said, this series is a commentary on selected verses from Surah al-Hujurat, which are Allah's counsel to Muslim communities on how to foster Muslim unity, the spirit of community, and also telling them, warning them against those behaviors, those words and deeds, that if they engage in it, it will cause the Muslims who should love one another to actually despise one another. So tonight's selection is actually the first verse from the surah. And that is the statement of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in which He says, يا أيها الذين آمنوا لا تقدموا بين يدي الله ورسوله واتقوا الله إن الله سميع عليم. O you who believe, do not put yourselves before Allah and His Messenger, and fear Allah, indeed Allah is all hearing and all knowing. So Allah begins, and you find this a lot in the Quran. He'll preface an ayah by saying, Ya ayyuha alladhina amanu, O you who believe. And what you're going to notice is what always invariably follows Ya ayyuha alladhina amanu is an amr or a nahi. Is a command, do this, or a nahi, a prohibition, don't do that. Why does Allah preface these awamir wa nawahi, these commands and prohibitions, with O you who believe? Because basically He's trying to teach us that this thing that I'm commanding you to do, doing it is from Iman. This thing I'm telling you not to do, not doing it is from Iman. And if you do it, it's a sign that your Iman is lacking, and it could be non-existent. This thing that I'm telling you to do, if you do it, it's a sign that you believe. But if you don't do it, it's a sign that your Iman is lacking or your Iman is non-existent. That's why Allah says, O you who believe. And that's why Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, he said, إذا سمعت الله يقول في القرآن يا أيها الذين آمنوا فأوعها سمعك. He said, anytime you read in the Quran or you hear in the Quran, oh you who believe, then pay attention to what follows. Why? Because this is basically telling you whether or not you're a believer or not. This is your gauge to measure, am I really a believer or not? So he says, oh you who believe, لا تقدموا بين يدي الله ورسوله. وعليكم السلام. Don't put yourselves before Allah and His Messenger. What does it mean, putting yourself before Allah and His Messenger? What does that mean? The basic meaning, as mentioned by the scholars of tafsir, is that, O Muslim, O believer, do not believe in your heart. Do not say or do in religious matters except with certain knowledge and in accordance with what Allah and His Messenger have said. That's the basic meaning, that a Muslim is not supposed to just believe on his own, say on his own, do on his own as it relates to religious matters, but rather he's supposed to consult the credible religious sources to determine what he believes, what he should say, what he should do. Ask the scholars, and don't just do what you think is right, but do what is actually right. And don't, after finding out, and this is important, do not, after finding out what Allah and His Messenger have said, opt to do otherwise. Feel yourself at liberty to disregard what they said and do whatever you want to do. That's the meaning of in a nutshell, that's the meaning of لا تقدموا بين يدي الله ورسوله. Do not put yourselves before Allah and His Messenger. So our opinions, brothers and sisters, should never supersede the decree of Allah and His Messenger. If they say, this is good for you, you shouldn't say, I disagree. If they say, don't do that, we shouldn't say, why not? I don't see anything wrong with it. If they say, believe in this, we shouldn't say, well, I can't wrap my head around how some people were sealed behind a wall, and they will remain behind that wall until the end of time. Centuries have passed with them behind this wall, and they keep trying to break through the wall. Every day they work tirelessly to make a hole in the wall. They're only able to make a hole in the wall small enough to just get a ray of light in, and then when they come back the next day, it's sealed up again. I can't wrap my head around how that could be, so why do I have to believe in that? I shouldn't have to believe in that. This is a taqaddum. This is putting ourselves before Allah and His Messenger. They say believe in something, we just what? We believe in it. Especially since we call ourselves Muslims. And what does Muslim mean? The one who what? Submits and surrenders. We don't argue with God. If God says believe in this, we believe in it. طيب. So this is the basic meaning of لا تقدموا بين يدي الله ورسوله. Basic meaning. But I want to give you some more practical examples that are real life examples that we're living with today in the Muslim community. The first one is declaring some truth unspeakable, some religious practices unfashionable or obsolete. Let me say that again. One example of a taqaddum, putting ourselves before Allah and His Messenger, is when we declare some truth to be unspeakable. Or we declare some religious practices as unfashionable or obsolete. Yeah, this used to be something that they did, but now it doesn't make sense for us to be doing that. Times have changed. So for example, a person says to an imam. Let's say one of these leaders of the mosque says to an imam, he says, I noticed in your khutbah you spoke about X, Y, and Z. Don't speak about X, Y, and Z anymore. I don't ever want to hear a khutbah or a class in this mosque where you speak about X, Y, and Z. So the imam says, okay, let me ask you a question. X, Y, and Z, are they from the Islamic teachings? Are they in the Quran? For example, hijab. Hijab. Is it in the Quran? Is it part of Islam? Oh, of course. The person who's telling him don't speak about it anymore says, yes, of course it's in the Quran. He quotes the ayah. He says, but it's better that certain religious subjects go unmentioned and certain behaviors are not criticized. There's lots of women who come to the mosque and they don't wear hijab. We don't want to make them feel uncomfortable, he says. So then the imam is like, okay, it's in the Quran, it's in the Sunnah, it's part of Islam. How am I supposed to know what can be mentioned and what can't be mentioned? Which ones are these things that are better left unsaid? And the person says, either explicitly or implicitly, he says, the ones that make me uncomfortable, make me feel called out, make me feel guilty. If it's something that I don't practice, I don't want you to talk about it. Basically, he says in a nutshell, and this is a real thing. Don't think that this is a hyperbole. This is a real thing where people actually get angry, get upset at people who talk about certain aspects of the deen that they don't practice. Like, in this case, the hijab. If my wife doesn't wear hijab, I don't want to come to the mosque and hear a lecture about how women should wear hijab because she's going to yell at me all the way home, right? I don't want her to be upset. I don't want to be upset. So I don't want to hear that in the mosque. I don't want to hear hijab in the mosque. You think I'm exaggerating? I'm not exaggerating. طيب, another example of a taqaddum, putting ourselves before Allah and His Messenger, is cancel culture. Seeking to mute the scholarly voices when they say things that we don't like. We want to mute their voices. We want them to be quiet. We want to make it so that they can't speak. So we don't have to hear, wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah, what we don't want to hear. And this is a common trend amongst highly educated and extremely liberal Muslims. They demonize and downplay the importance of scholars. Why do we need imams? Anybody can lead the prayer. Anybody can give a sermon. Why do we need to consult scholars who are overseas, despite their vast knowledge of Islam, when they don't live in this country and they don't know our everyday circumstances? So why should we consult them? We should consult ourselves because we're living the experience. They say things like this. And they don't want to consult these people because they make unpopular what? Unpopular statements. They say things like, alternative lifestyles are haram. It's haram. It's wrong. And it's not okay. We can't be a part of it. We can't approve of it. We can't express sympathy for those people. They say that. And this is in our environment. It's what? It's unpopular. So these liberal Muslims, they say, see, that puts us in a bad situation. I go to work and my coworker says, look what I found on YouTube. This scholar is saying this. Is that what your religion really says? That puts me in a bind, right? So what they prefer to do is what? Mute those voices. Oh, these are demons. These are Wahhabis. These are Salafis. These are the extremist Muslims. And they encourage people to do what? To follow the celebrity imams who make more popular statements and say what they want to hear. They mute the scholarly voices, the truly scholarly voices that are saying Allah said and His Messenger said. And they promote the voices of the celebrity imams who say what they want to hear. Cancel culture. Or another layer of that cancel culture is we don't need scholars. We're highly educated individuals. Highly educated in what? Secular sciences. But because we're so highly educated in secular sciences, we can go to the Quran, we can go to the Hadith and figure out what we're supposed to believe and how we're supposed to behave. We can figure out, we can draw our own conclusions about what's right and wrong. We can make our own ijtihad. And we can do that completely independent of scholarly processes and precedent. It doesn't matter if all of the scholars, regardless of madhab, throughout history, are unanimously agreed that a woman cannot lead a man in the obligatory prayer. So for example, a woman can't come and lead Salat al-Jumu'ah. She can't come and lead Salat al-Isha. All agreed about that. They'll come and say, that's wrong. A woman can lead. And it doesn't matter if all of the scholars have said otherwise. They're wrong and we're right. This is all an extension of what? Cancel culture. Demonizing the scholars and downplaying their importance, trying to mute their voices. Number 3, another example of a taqaddum, putting ourselves before Allah and His Messenger, is taking the attitude, these rules don't apply to me. So people want special, preferential treatment. Yes, these are the rules of Islam. I acknowledge that. But they shouldn't apply to me, or they shouldn't apply to these people because they are special. And I don't want to I have an example, but it might be lengthy and I don't want to take too much time. But I do want to mention that the Prophet ﷺ in the famous hadith of al-Makhzumi allati saraqat, there was a woman from the tribe of Bani Makhzum, a very famous and powerful tribe, who had committed larceny, committed theft. And in some of the commentaries, it says that what she used to do is she would borrow things. And then she would deny that she had borrowed them. So she might go to a woman and say, you have extra jewelry, there's a walima, I'd like to borrow some of your jewelry so I can look nice for the walima. And she would give her that. Then when she would come back and say, hey, remember the jewelry? She said, you didn't give me any jewelry. She might borrow some pots to cook a large meal. And then the person would come back to collect those pots and say, you didn't give me any pots. So that's stealing. So when this was raised to the Prophet ﷺ, he made up his mind to do or to apply the prescribed punishment, to cut off her hand. So those people from Bani Makhzum were beside themselves. Come on, we can't have a woman from our tribe walking around with one hand. That's an aib. That'll bring shame. Whenever people will say, the woman from Bani Makhzum, she stole it, etc. We can't have that. So there has to be another way. Maybe there's a ransom we can pay. Maybe there's some special community service she can do. We need somebody to go to the Messenger of Allah and say, hey, you just can't do that to them because they're special. So there has to be an alternative for them. Let's ask Usama ibn Zayd because the Prophet loves him so much. And so the story goes that he goes and he tries to intercede. The Prophet became very upset. And in the course of his response to Usama ibn Zayd and the khutbah that he gave to the people, عامة, he said, إنما أهلك الذين كان قبلكم أنهم كانوا إذا سرق فيهم الشريف تركوه وإذا سرق فيهم الضعيف أقاموا عليه الحد. He said, what destroyed the people who came before you is that if somebody who was from the nobility committed theft, they would let him free. They would let him go. They would just overlook what he did and they wouldn't punish him. But if somebody was from the lower class, if they did the exact same thing, they would punish him. This is what destroyed the people before you, and unfortunately, we Muslims are inviting our own destruction by doing the same thing. And like I said, I have a very good example, but I don't want to give it only because it'll be a lengthy one, and I want to get through these things and offer you an opportunity to discuss or to ask questions. Number 4, the last one I'm going to give from examples of a taqaddum, bayni dayillah, putting ourselves before Allah, is selective perception. Only seeing what you want to see, only hearing what you want to hear. And this is the example of where a person intentionally fails to notice, quickly forgets, conveniently overlooks information that contradicts his or her established beliefs or convictions. You get in these arguments with people about Islam, and these people will do what? They'll start to manipulate the texts, highlighting those that support their opinion while concealing those that undermine, disprove, or debunk their stance. And the scholars have traditionally referred to this person, this blameworthy approach, this erroneous principle that these people apply. They call it by a certain name, or they give it a certain phrase. They say, these are the people of i'taqid thumma istadil. These are the people who, they say, reach a conclusion, make up your mind about something, and then search for evidence to support it. You make up your mind, and then let's just look for something that will support it and ignore whatever repudiates it. Now, I want to ask you all a question. You heard the examples, and I'll repeat the headings. So you have cancel culture, declaring some truth unspeakable. These rules don't apply. Selective perception, seeing and hearing only what you want to hear and see. What do all of these examples have in common? What do they all have in common? And that will let you know how can you recognize التقدم بين يدي الله ورسوله. تفضل.
To support your personal desire.
That's good, but there's something more to it, something more specific that they all have in common. Selective perception, cancel culture. These rules don't apply to me. تفضل.
All of them are putting yourself
Said from the mouths of babes. What they all have in common is that the people are making religion about who? About themselves. Instead of making religion about who it's supposed to be about. Who? Allah. They're making it about themselves. This is how you fall into at-taqaddum bayna yaday Allahi wa rasuli, when you make it about you. How I feel, what makes me feel comfortable, what I want to do, my quality of life, as opposed to purpose of life, which is why we're here. Not to live the life that we want to live the life Allah wants us to live. وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ. I've not created jinkind and mankind except to worship me. It's not about quality of life, it's about purpose of life, fulfilling the purpose for which you were created, even if you have at the expense of quality of life. Just to wrap up the ayah itself. So after all of this, Allah says, وَاتَّقُوا and fear Allah, letting you know that putting yourself before Allah and His Messenger is the opposite of fearing Allah. And doing so has consequences. Doing so has consequences. Don't think that there's no consequence for making it about you and then calling yourself a Muslim at the same time. ثم بعد ذلك he says, إِنَّ اللَّهَ سَمِيعٌ عَلِيمٌ. Why should you fear Allah? Why should you be afraid? To put yourself before Allah and His Messenger, you should be afraid, because if you do it, your doing it will not escape Allah's knowledge. If you do it openly, He will hear it. If you say it, oh, this shouldn't apply to me. Oh, these scholars are demons, Wahhabis. And you say these things, Allah is hearing it. That won't go unheard by Allah. And some people, they think they're slick. They do what? They harbor it in their chest. They don't speak about it, but that's how they feel. Inna Allaha sami'un. He hears it if you say it. Alim, even if you what? If you harbor it in your chest. It won't escape His knowledge. And so you should be afraid. You should be afraid of committing a taqaddum, putting yourself before Allah and His Messenger and making religion about you when it should be about Allah. Jalla jalaluhu wa aduma as-sultanu. Wa aduma sultanu. طيب, now let's make the connection before we close. We said last week that this surah, Allah has primarily dedicated it to to teaching the Muslims how to foster unity and the spirit of Muslim community, and to teach them to warn them against those words and deeds and those behaviors, those incorrect interpersonal relations that can make them disunited, create schism, cause Muslims who should love one another to hate one another. We said that's what it's about. So why does Allah open a surah primarily dedicated to that with the words, O you who believe, la tuqaddimu bayna yadayhi Allahi wa rasuli. O you who believe, do not put yourselves before Allah and His Messenger. What's the connection? The connection, brothers and sisters, Allah knows best, is twofold. One, Allah wants us to be united upon His order. Give me one word for His order. Sharia, another word for His order. Sharia is good. Islam. He wants our unity to be based upon Islam or Sharia, the Sharia of Islam. He wants it to be based upon that. He doesn't want us to be united based upon ethnicity, based upon nationality. He doesn't want it to be about these things. He wants it to be about the deen. La tuqaddimu bayna yaday Allahi wa rasulih. Don't put anything before Allah and His Messenger. Y'all see that? That's one reason why He prefaces it, that the unity that you're supposed to have on Muslims should be based upon something real, something tangible, something meaningful, not something shallow, superficial, like color and race and ethnicity and nationality. What passport do you carry? Like class. The intellectuals, the intelligentsia, we're going to unite around that. Doctors and engineers and professionals. No. It says no. Make it about Islam. That's the first thing. The second thing is Allah wants to clarify that the Islam that should unite us should be the Islam that Allah and His Messenger prescribed and taught. It shouldn't be an Islam of our own what? Our own making. Because don't we have groups that call themselves Muslims? But they have beliefs that contradict the beliefs of orthodoxy. And they have practices that contradict the practices of orthodoxy. They do things that the Prophet never did, never legislated, never sanctioned. His companions never did, never sanctioned. Things that were invented centuries after the Prophet ﷺ, and invented by deviant groups. But they became popular amongst the mainstream. They do these things. And basically Allah is saying, don't become united around a deen that you made up or has components and parts that you made up. And this is the thing too that I want to say, because we started out by talking about how on these issues of common good, common interest, the Muslims in Colombia, for example, in other cities, for those who are listening from other cities, they need to work together. Like, for example, youth. We should work together. We should pool our resources because we're better together, and our youth will get a better product if we work together, right? Mm-hmm. So many people will criticize and counter and say, okay, well, there's certain people who won't work with certain people. Okay, why won't they work with them? We delve deeper. And it's not a personal thing. It's not an ethnic thing. It's not a color thing. It's because some people, they do bid'ah. And not only do they do it themselves, but they make it a part of these types of things. And so now when we work with them on some of these projects, then we end up doing what? We end up exposing our youth, for example, to bid'ah. And we also end up giving the impression that we approve of it. You guys see that? And so this is the dilemma. So yeah, we need to work together, but work together in a purely Islamic fashion. Which means that if there's any question about something you're doing, then you do what? You leave that at home. Y'all see what I'm saying? But people don't want to do that. Why? Because what they're holding on to is not the rope of Allah. It's what? It's a deen of their own making, a rope of their own making. We got to stop that. La tuqaddimu bayna yaday Allahi wa rasulih. Don't put yourselves what you want, what you made up. Don't put that before Allah and His Messenger. And with that, we'll close, and that gives us a little time for some questions and some discussion before the adhan and the iqam of Salat al-Isha, which should be at 8:30 today, inshallah ta'ala. But before we open that discussion, I just want to remind 3 Muslim sisters, just converted to Islam, need to learn wudu and salat. This is something that we have to step up and do. So many Muslims, since I've been here, just in the few months I've been here, I think like maybe 4 or 5 people converted in this mosque. That's the ones I saw. That's the ones that I was a part of. These 3 sisters, I didn't see them convert, but they did. Other people have converted. I'm going to ask you honestly, where are those people? I don't see them. I don't see them anymore. Part of the reason why we don't see them anymore is because it's hard. Once you convert, it's hard to learn how to pray. Just learn how to pray. You see the other Muslims praying and they pray with ease. And you're looking at the words and you're turning the paper, turning the book, trying to figure out, is it upside down? It's a totally different language. And then these specific statements have to be said while you're in specific positions. And those positions have to be done in a specific order. It's a lot. And that's just one thing. They go home and their families may not be accepting. They struggle with some of the moral requirements. Whatever it is, they have all these struggles and they don't find the support. They don't find the support. So this is an opportunity for us to give that support. You guys see that? And so for my ladies, my sisters, please, on Sunday, and it would be great if there were a group of you and you exchange phone numbers. So after this, I have a card with their number on it. And if you guys could reach out and say, hey, we'll be here for you Sunday at 1 p.m. Jazakumullah khairan. And with that, we'll open the floor for any questions, comments, critiques, etc. هذا وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد. Any questions? Any comments? Any critiques? تفضل شيخ أحمد.
The last segment of the lecture, when we were talking about like the differences even in Colombia from sects that proceed with some religion aspects that's not really of Sunnah as they are. But you also said like we can work with others, right?
Mm-hmm.
As long as it doesn't jeopardize our religion.
Uh-huh.
Do you think like you're advising to like work whatever unite us of all both pieces of religion, and we avoid to be with them when they're not doing what's not of Sunnah and Quran? Like,
no, because
or are you saying like
تفضل.
cut it all together?
No, I'm not saying that. And I know the statement that you're pointing to in Arabi. And that principle is not a principle that I would promote. But what I will say is that there are certain issues, certain concerns that impact us all as Muslims in Colombia. And I would say that the youth is one of them, that if we continue to operate in the way that we're operating, minimizing our human and financial resources, then we are basically the cause of not just our own undoing, but the undoing of our youth. So you have these people who have the ideas, and they have the responsive pedagogy, and they have the ability to relate because they live the experience. And then you have these people who can write the checks, right? And then you have these people who have the youth. What good does all of their expertise and competency do if they don't have the youth? If these people are like, no, these are our youth and you can't work with them. Let's say that these two get together, but the people who write the checks, because a lot of the stuff needs funding. If we really want to do some really good programs, yeah, they need to be funded. And these people, we're not going to write checks because you're from that group. No, in these areas, yeah, we should work together for the common good of our youth. At the same time, you're going to have, because some of these masajid have different, they've separated for valid reasons. It's not just, I don't like the color of your skin or I don't like the language you speak. It's like valid reasons. Like I said, bid'ah. So in that case, what I'm advocating for is that, okay, we need to work for the youth and we're going to be better together because these people have the checks, these people have the youth, and these people, they have the competency. So work together on that. But when we come together, there are going to be some things that we differ about. They're questionable things. Leave those at home. We're just going to work together based upon what is agreed upon as acceptable because it's for the benefit of our youth. That's different from, how does the phrase go in Arabi? نتعاون فيما اتفقنا عليه ولا نتعاون فيما اختلفنا فيه, or however it goes. It's different from that. I'm not supporting that. I'm not advocating that, but I'm just saying this issue right here is too critical for us to be the checks, the youth, the competent people, and everybody just in their own orbit. No, they got to come together because what? It's going to benefit the youth, but at the same time, they have to not put themselves before Allah and His Messenger. This is something questionable. Let me just put out there. Celebrating Mawlid Nabi. Come on, man. This is not something that the scholars have okayed. This is something a lot of scholars say is bid'ah, and the fact that people do it in almost every Muslim country doesn't make it right. It doesn't make it right. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, He says, وَإِن تُطِعْ أَكْثَرَ مِنْ فِي الْأَرْضِ يُضِلُّوكَ عَنْ سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ. If you obey most of the people, they'll misguide you from the path of Allah. Yeah, just because everybody does something doesn't make it right. In fact, when most of the people do something, it's wrong. In most cases. So yeah, we're not going to have some type of program and then we're going to promote that. We're going to invite people to that. No, this is something that there's a legitimate beef about it. So we're going to leave that at home. That's what if they can agree on that and then do something good for the youth. And again, like I said, the group of minds that are here, come on, man. You got to give credit where credit is due. Promotional event, stellar. Camp, stellar. And some of the other things that they've been doing on the weekends, whether you're aware of it or not, very good programs. And so you got to admit, these people have a level of competency that some of these other people don't have. How do we not take advantage of that? How do we just let that because, Muslimin versus Crips, Bloods? Come on, we can't do that. Like, any other questions, comments? Tafadhal, Sheikh.
If you want to confront that, to start a youth program, what would you preface it with? How would you approach that from the get-go so you won't come and do that down the road?
Just like that? See, I don't beat around the bush. I would come and sit with them and say exactly what I just said to you. I wouldn't, him and haw and try to figure out a diplomatic, bid'ah, things that are considered bid'ah by any, leave that at home. I would say it just like that. Let's work for the youth and leave our personal preferences out of it. Let's do what's agreed upon and only what's agreed upon. And I'm say this too, like having Jumu'ah at Asr time. It's like, this is not orthodox, man. Even if you can find one or two ulama who say that's what we call shudud. That's something we avoid in Islam. We avoid the shudud. Wal aqwal ash-shadda. So I'm just saying, it's like, when you come, don't announce that, don't call to that, leave that at home, because you know it's something questionable. Let's just do the agreed upon things and do for these youth. We're losing the youth. We're losing them. Say what you want to say. We're losing the youth. And I keep mentioning this and I'm going to keep on mentioning it. When Khalid came, Jazakallah khair, and he sat with the youth during the camp and he asked them, he said, how many non-Islamic things and things that you know are not right and you wouldn't want your parents to see do you have on your phone? And they were honest. Lots, loads. How many Islamic apps do you have? Quran, Hadith, Hisnul Muslim. 1, 2. How often do you open that app versus these other things that you're looking at? If you were to put it, in a percentage, 98, 2%. They admitted it. And we can keep turning away and saying, no, my children are different, my children. No, don't be fooled by that. Don't allow yourself to be deceived by the shaitan. They're on TikTok. They're looking at porn. And they're going to school with non-Muslims and learn the non-Muslim secular curriculum that tells them there's no such thing as gender. It's okay for a boy to want to be a girl and a girl to want to be a boy. And, all these things are okay. They're being bombarded by this. You don't think that they're being affected by it? When we know that people are products of their environment and the Prophet said so in his hadith? So I say all that to say, what are we doing? Why are we playing? Because why? It's got to be my way. I got to be able to promote my bid'ah. Leave your bid'ah at home and let's do it for these kids. And I hope the people are watching from these other masajid. I hope they're watching. And I'm big on this, man. Anybody who knows me, I'm big. Where's the lie? I'm going to talk, I'm going to preach, and I'm going to tell you like it is. I don't sugarcoat. And anybody can come and point out the lie, and I'll recant. But don't come to me and say, oh, I didn't like the way you said that. It hurt my feelings when you said that. Where's the lie? Show me the lie. I'm going to say, I'm sorry, I was wrong. And I'll come back next week and say, I said this and it should have been that. But I'm not here for your feelings. I'm here for these kids. The checks, the youth, the competent people, they need to get together and quit playing. That's it. Anybody else? Questions, comments, concerns? Fadli.
I have a question as far as how do you propose that we unite the community that we do have here right now? Like, for example, these 3 sisters, these new Muslims that are going to come here. I know a few of us have talked about getting together with some kind of group, an active outreach group for these new Muslims, because it's a constant, ongoing project that needs to be. So how do you propose that? Okay, yes, we'll come on Sunday, inshallah, we'll talk to these sisters, but, how do we get the people in our community, because I believe that we do have a very strong community, how do we get the people in our community to commit to actually sign up for these different groups, like the Janazah group and the, like the Coke Drive and these type of things? How do we continually get these people? How do we get these people?
That's our constant dilemma. That we do these types of things, we do these types of initiatives, we have a lot of ideas about what we can do to improve the community, et cetera, and so on. And then the problem that we run into, the brick wall that we run into, is personnel. Just people willing to do the work. And I can't claim that I have an answer for that right now, other than to continue to preach and make people try to understand, touch people's hearts and make them see that community is not these 10 or 12 people who do everything. Community is everybody doing what they can, everybody pitching in. And this is something you just have to keep hammering and hammering and hammering until people get it. And unfortunately, we haven't, we have to take part of the blame, and we just haven't hammered it enough. So people would just wake up and get it. And also some people are not culturally predisposed. They're not culturally predisposed to working in a community setting. And so you have to break through cultural barriers as well. And so it's a lot to it, and it's a conversation we need to have, and I appreciate you bringing it out to the forefront. Getting close to, and I'm not trying to run away from it because it's a very good question. It's just we need time to really hash it out. And inshallah ta'ala, hopefully in the course of these lectures, we'll try to dig into that, inshallah ta'ala. And with that, atfadali.
Within the other communities, there are a lot of people
specialists and have a lot of skill sets that can contribute to the well-being of the children. I don't think that you meant it. It kind of came off that you were suggesting that the only competent people who work with the children were from this community, but it is across the board, and of course welcoming to anybody who has experience with children to come together. Am I understanding that that's your intention?
What I want to say is I appreciate you saying what you said. Wasn't my intention to imply that there are no competent people except the people here. But I do feel, and I'm very firm in that feeling, that the collection, the number of competent people across skill sets, I don't think that that's anywhere else. In addition to another layer is the fact that most of them are converts who have lived an experience outside of Islam that makes them able to relate to the youth of today that the other people don't have. I want to be clear, not implying that there are not other competent people in other communities. I just don't think that they have the number, and with that added layer that I just mentioned that we have here. So that's how I would clarify that. I hope that clarification will help clarify what I intended. But I did not intend to imply that we're the only ones with the competent people. Nobody else is competent. Nobody else is capable. Nobody else has any specific training that will make them qualified to do these types of programs. I'm just saying that we have some really, really good people here, and they're doing some really, really good things, and they should be utilized by the entire community of Colombia and not just Masjid Muslimin. And they should be able to reach with these programs all the youth and not just the youth that attend Muslimin. And with that, we'll bring today's session to a close. هذا وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.